Auto racing is a hotbed for sketchy money. We've discussed this at length on this channel. My first and second most viewed videos center around the impact of cigarettes on racing and a team that was entirely held up by a Ponzi scheme, respectively. In an industry dominated by dirty money, Formula One has had to deal with it the most. So, with this in mind, would you believe me if I told you that there was once an F1 ride funded by the most prolific drug lord of all time? This is the story of the career of Ricardo Londono, his roots in racing, the time he applied for his super license, and his links to one Pablo Escobar. Ricardo Londono, or Londono Bridge, but I'll just refer to him as Londono, was a native of the town of Medellin, Colombia, and quickly got a reputation in Colombian racing circles as someone who would race pretty much anything with an engine. 4 wheels, 2 wheels, even no wheels at all. He earned the nickname Cuchilla, or Razor, for his bravery and skills behind the wheel of an automobile. He became a local legend in Colombia, and that attracted some not-so-savory characters to his cause. Now, considering the city that he was from, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to get familiar with El Patron in some capacity. No, he wasn't toting the drugs himself, yet, but he did get to meet the man. If you've watched the Netflix series Narcos, you would know that Pablo Escobar was a self-professed gearhead and race fan, and even raced on his own time. So, naturally, considering that they shared a hobby and a hometown, they got to know one another. There's this one anecdote that gets told every so often that El Patron once bet Ricardo that he could come within 15 seconds of his time up a hill climb on the outskirts of Medellin. Now, we don't know the route, nor do we know exact times, but we do know that Pablo succeeded. He got within 8 seconds of Cuchilla's time, and would not allow him to live it down until the day that he died. By all means, he didn't win, but who are we to argue with one of the most dangerous men on the planet, right? Ricardo and Pablo were good buds, and naturally, Pablo would pledge some money to Ricardo's racing career, allowing him to make a decent living racing cars, which was a rare sight for that time. A decent living, yes, but no incentive to travel abroad. Unlike the Brazilian folks who went abroad young to further their careers, such as Emerson Fittipaldi, Nelson Piquet, Raul Boesel, Chico Serra, etc., Ricardo didn't leave Colombia until he was almost 30 years old. In 1979, Cuchilla would make his first international starts in IMSA, which figures that IMSA was where he would end up going first. Londono was not the first drug trade-affiliated driver to grace the U.S.'s sports car scene, and he would not be the last. They didn't call it the International Marijuana Smugglers Association for no reason. His team did not finish the 1979 12 Hours of Sebring, but they did finish 18th outright at the 24 Hours of Daytona that year. 1980 would be Cuchilla's first bit of Can-Am competition in conjunction with doing the endurance races. He would finish 2nd in his class and 7th outright at Daytona, and put up competitive numbers in his 9 Can-Am starts that year, the best of which being a P5 at Motorsport. After the 1980 IMSA season drew to a close, partially inspired by the successes of his fellow countryman Roberto Guerrero, who will come up later, Londono then made the decision to move to Europe to further his racing career. Along his racing travels, Ricardo began a working relationship with Colin Bennett, a former engineer at Team Lotus and co-owner of the Ensign team with Mo Nunn. Bennett fielded an old Lotus 78 in the season-ending British Formula One championship race for Londono at Silverstone. In an excellent recovery drive after a sizable accident in practice, Cuchilla would finish 7th that day, a vast improvement from his starting spot of P18. Bennett would then talk to Nunn about bringing him on to drive for Ensign for the 1981 season. The preceding couple of seasons for Ensign had been rough. They introduced a new car for 1980 that only produced stagnation instead of forward progress. They lost their star driver Clay Regazzoni after a terrible accident at Long Beach which left him paralyzed from the waist down, and the ensuing carousel of drivers couldn't score the team a single point in the World Constructors' Championship. Ensign needed money fast, and Bennett's friendship with Londono, and more importantly his friendship with Londono's mountain of cash, was a golden opportunity. Presumably without many questions asked, Londono inked a deal with Ensign to race in '81, and other sponsors would be found in the National Federation of Coffee Growers of Colombia and pasta manufacturers Pasta Doria. None had his funding, but there was only just one last issue. Londono didn't have a super license. This wasn't a surprise, given that Ricardo had generally limited international racing experience and virtually no international single-seater experience before here. Swiss journeyman Mark Schurer would be drafted in for the season opener at Long Beach, and Londono's debut would be delayed until race number 2, the Brazilian Grand Prix at Jacarepaguá. Jacarepaguá was taking over hosting duties from Interlagos, and an extra acclimatization session was added to the race weekend to get drivers used to the quote-unquote new track. This was Londono's chance to properly get some seat time and perform his super license exam. After Schurer ran some installation laps, Cuchilla got in the car and started running some time laps with other cars around. He wasn't the class of the field by any stretch, but he wasn't embarrassing himself. Far from it, actually. His best lap of 141.770 might have been 4 seconds behind Carlos Reutemann's leading time, but it was ahead of names like Gilles Villeneuve, Alan Jones, John Watson, and Keke Rosberg. If you were to extrapolate a 4-second gap to pole in qualifying, that would have put Cuchilla in P21 on the grid. Not bad. Not bad at all, especially for the equipment that he was running with. But speaking of Keke Rosberg, he was part of the reason that Londono's day would end after just 10 laps. While he was pretty fast for someone so unproven, Cuchilla's aggressive driving style did not ingratiate him very well with the folks that he had to share the track with. Nico's dad was the man most incensed by his exploits, and, when given the chance, decided to brake-check the kid like a dick. Of course, this ended in terminal damage that put both guys out of the rest of the session. Come Thursday afternoon, Londono got the news that he would be denied his super license. Outwardly, the reasoning given was that FISA was concerned by his driving style and the accident that he had with Rosberg, but if you look a bit deeper, the true reasoning reveals itself. If you look at photos of the Ensign car from Long Beach and Jacarepaguá, you'll see that it just has the word Colombia written on the side. Colombia was also listed in the necessary paperwork as Londono's main/largest source of funding, alongside Pasta Doria and the Juan Valdez people. Not any specific Colombian company, not the Colombian Tourism Board, not even the Colombian government. Just Colombia. This irregularity, as well as the accident with Keke, prompted Bernie Eccleston to do some more research on just where Cuchilla was getting his money, which ended in him discovering a paper trail that led directly to our old pal Pablo. Now, Bernie let quite a lot of things slide so long as bills were still getting paid. Tobacco? Go wild. Condoms and lads mags? Hell yeah, slap that on your car. But a colossal count of cold cash coming courtesy of Colombian cocaine cowboys? That was a bridge too far. It would have soiled the reputation of the sport of auto racing to so shamelessly accept money from the cartel of all places. So, no F1 for Ricardo. Ensign would draft Schurer back in for Jacarepaguá, and despite starting in P18, he would take advantage of exceedingly wet conditions to bring the car home in an incredible 4th place, in the process setting the fastest lap of the day. That secured him the ride on the full-time basis until Spain, where he would then be replaced by Eliseo Salazar, who would take Ensign the rest of the way home. Nunn would still end up getting his Colombian money in the form of Roberto Guerrero in 1982. See, I told you it would come up again. Guerrero would struggle in his rookie season in Formula 1, and Ensign would close its doors permanently post-season. Now, what of Cuchilla? Well, our scorned friend would find a Formula 2 ride with Alan Docking for the rest of 1981, which would not be very successful. 9th place finish at a rainy Pau Grand Prix, engine troubles at Pergusa, a flywheel failure at Spa, and a did not start at Donington Park would bookend his European career entirely. He would return to America and race on and off in IMSA before retiring from racing in 1986. After returning home to Colombia, he would open up a helicopter and airplane dealership, and this would prove to be his true avenue into the ugliest side of life in Colombia. One can imagine the type of folk in that country who were not only interested in such equipment as helicopters and Cessnas, but who could actually afford to buy them. In 1998, a plane that was carrying 1,200 kilos of cocaine was discovered to be owned by Londono. 2 years later, Londono would be issued a constriction order, and over $10 million worth of classic cars and other property would be seized from his home under suspicion that they were acquired illegally through his links with the cartel. Be that as it may, he did avoid prison time. Unfortunately, Cuchilla would meet a grisly end, being shot and killed in an organized hit on July 18, 2009. It was a horrific final chapter to a life which, in another time or in another place, deserved to be remembered more for his racing achievements rather than the unhappy associations that led to his death. And so that is the story of Ricardo Londono and his close brush with the pinnacle of European motorsports. A local legend in his homeland, caught up with the wrong people, almost became an international racing star, but his connections ended up being his downfall. Who knows if the cocaine cowboy money would have ended up saving Ensign in the long run, or whether or not Ricardo would have ended up being any good in a race situation, but I'd like to believe that he would have been. Alright, that's it from me. I have been Bobcat205, and I'm just now realizing that this title is a bit of hyperbole.